I'm standing here today because of my best friend, Brett Bennett. But that's not where I start. I grew up in Los Angeles, California. It was very hot. The asphalt playground surface partly melted in the sun, but I wore my winter coat every day, all day of school when I was 12. All through classes, outside, all seasons, all year, my coat got filthy dirty and sweaty smelling from never taking it off. But I couldn't bear to be seen. My self-consciousness was clinical if anyone had bothered to check on me. I left home at 17. I couldn't wait any longer to get away from my unhappy parents, my drunk and violent father. Luckily for me, local college was cheap. I could get a job and support myself, and my mom helped me out. I met Brett in college because we had 2 of the same classes. Even with 300 students in each class, I noticed Brett. He had shiny dark hair, he was tall, that hair amongst all the blonde heads in LA. I noticed him coming into our class on the history of India, and then another week he sat down randomly next to me in a class on Hollywood films. I thought that was an amazing coincidence. 2 classes together with all those people and those 2 subjects. But I almost missed knowing Brett because I saw on his papers that he lived on Fraternity Row. Frat boy, no thank you. But this was UCLA, 50,000 students. I said right out loud to him, hey, what are the chances that we would have 2 classes together? And he looked up and said, oh, clearly we have to be friends. Neither of us were history majors, and so thousands of years of Indian history, we were both pretty overwhelmed. Brett invited me over to study for the midterm exam together. Oh, yeah. When I got to his place, I found out he didn't live in a fraternity. He lived in his own single apartment. He made us tea, and he played movie soundtracks by Bernard Herrmann because of our class on Hollywood films. We sat at his kitchen table, and we made up flashcards so that we could quiz each other. Can you believe that I still have those materials? A New History of India. Flashcards are full of these kings and dates and empires. Chandra Gupta, monk, died in 301, fasted to death. Why we had to memorize this, I cannot tell you. We were studying British colonialism in India and looking at how the British stole the land from the Indians by demanding to see written deeds of ownership that didn't exist. We were trying to get that on an index card, and this reminded Brett, of a line in an old Joan Crawford movie. And suddenly he jumped up from the kitchen table and he recites it like all one word, "I'll do anything for those kids." he could not believe I hadn't seen this apparently famous Hollywood movie. I couldn't believe he was trying to use it to help us remember anything about British colonialism. But he grabbed an index card and he wrote down, like all one word, what the British soldiers would say, "Where's the deeds? Where's the deeds?" And he was right, because even though neither of us got to write our essay on that, I still could remember it. And I still remember him now reciting all that. And of course, I haven't forgotten that kind of theft in colonial India. So before the final exam, Brett said we should go to the museum and look at the art from India. Well, it wasn't a date or anything. I was too insecure to think about that. But it was our first outing together. It was also my first time in a museum. And Brett knew how to make it interesting. It was, first of all, so dizzying to me, because these ancient statues from the other side of the world, there they were in air-conditioned glass boxes. Brett rolled up a piece of paper like a spyglass, and he hands it to me and says, "Check out the statue faces." I look at this guy. Who is this? What a way to be in the world. Oh, but I take the spyglass and I look around at its gods we were studying and look at them, and suddenly I could see it. The nose is broken. And another one, all of the noses are broken. Brett said it was the Mongol invaders. They didn't have time to destroy all the gods, so they defaced them. How's that for cultural power? Again, we did not get to write our final exam on that, but I never forgot those noses, and I never forgot that you can telescope the museum to see more of it. I really liked that Brett was my size. We're both about 6 feet tall, his shoulders broader. He worked out. I did not work out. I started to wear Brett's old clothes because I saw he was throwing away a shirt. He was giving it to charity. He said there was a hole in it. I didn't care about it. Could I have it? And after that, I got all Brett's giveaways. Now, I had less money even than Brett did, so all clothes were welcome. But what I liked about Brett's clothes is that they were his. He picked them out. He always looked great. I didn't have the confidence to pick out anything, but if they were Brett's, they must be good. It doesn't matter if the style or the color was wrong. I felt better wearing them. Another semester, Brett had a filmmaking class assignment to make his own short subject. And he tells me, "Joanne, you will be my subject." Oh, what are you talking about, Brett? You know I'm too self-conscious to be filmed. No, I can't do that. "Oh, Joanne, it's already decided. It has to be you. Your hair will film well in the light," he tells me. Oh no, now do I have to cut off my hair to get out of this? But my objections were useless. I showed up at Brett's house. By then he lived in the Miracle Mile neighborhood of LA. It's full of these warm stucco buildings with Spanish roll tile roofs. He started me out on the exterior stairs before we even got in the house. Put me on the stairs, and he draped me over the brown mosaic tiles. And the earth tones around me were glowing. Palm trees actually ruffled in the breeze. California sunlight coming through, and Brett positioned me so that shadows would wash across my face. And I started to feel a little artsy. But mostly I was so glad my legs weren't in the picture because I always hated my calves. Then we twirled around, taking pictures in his living room, and during filming breaks, we danced. Such an LA song on a gorgeous LA day. Next, Brett got me on the floor in a doorway, and he put my hair in a patch of sunlight, and he fanned it out. He got behind me, and I could hear him humming. He was filming my hair in the light. I relaxed. I never saw the finished film. I hated seeing pictures of myself. I still hate it. But I like to remember that day. One weekend, Brett came with me to visit friends of mine who were going to school in Santa Barbara. It's about 2 hours up the coast from LA. We drove along the Pacific Ocean. And then we went to a party Saturday night on campus. And afterwards, some of us stayed overnight at my friend Martha's dorm suite. And Martha put some blankets on the floor for me and Brett. Me up against the wall, Brett next to me, and another friend, Billy, he got the sofa. In the morning, when I woke up, Brett wasn't next to me, but I figured he was in the bathroom. He wasn't in the bathroom. He wasn't in the dorm suite at all. He didn't leave a note, and he didn't come back. So, where is he? It was Sunday morning. Nothing was open. I had the car. No one knew where he was. My friends hadn't seen him leave. So, this is before cell phones. I didn't know where he was. I had to give up. After a couple hours, I decided to head back to LA by myself. Just before I turned onto the highway, the 101 South, I went into the fast food there. It was a Taco Bell. I went to get some coffee for the road. I get in line, and ahead of me is Brett. Brett, what are you doing here? Are you kidding me? I've been waiting for you at the dorm. What? He didn't look at me, and he didn't say anything. He just put his thumb out. So I know he was hitchhiking back to LA. Oh, I right away realized something's wrong. I must have done something terrible. I must have said something. Oh, for him to leave like this without saying anything? Oh no, what did I do? But I didn't know how to ask him. I start instantly nervous sweating and my mouth dried out, and we were just standing in line at the Taco Bell without discussing it. We got coffee and we drove back to LA. Didn't talk about it. It took at least a year for Brett to finally tell me what happened that night in Santa Barbara. He said, "Joanne, I'm gay." He looked really scared when he said this, but he kept going. And that night in the dorm, that was the first time I had sex with a man. Oh my God, I thought. And I was right there. Oh, Billy had slid off the sofa onto Brett. They had sex with me alongside them. I slept through the whole thing. Must have been a really quiet blowjob. But too bad for Brett. Oh, what restraint that must have taken from him after all the years of restraint and hidden desires and not talking about this, and finally coming true. And he couldn't really do much about it with me next to him. I figured that because I was there, I think his shame flooded him. Later, when he told me about it, I could just imagine him on the floor there, wondering whether or not I had slept through it. See, Brett wasn't out. He hadn't told me he was gay. He didn't want me to know he was gay. He hardly admitted it to himself. And then this. When he told me about it, I could really, he said he spent the rest of the night in a cold fear about facing me in the morning. So when it was finally light enough, he just crept out of the dorm, got away. When we both finished college, we went to grad schools on opposite sides of the country. Brett went to UC Berkeley to study architecture, and I went to New York City to study the Middle East at NYU. We didn't have money, either of us. And in those days, for those of you who have no idea about this, long distance calls were really expensive. So we couldn't call each other. We wrote to each other instead. We wrote letters all the time. Letters, postcards, pictures. We were in touch all the time, sometimes every week. And Brett, of course, saved me his old clothes. I went to visit Brett in Berkeley for my birthday, and he was excited to surprise me with opera tickets. The Marriage of Figaro at the San Francisco Opera House. Well, like the museum, I had never been to an opera, and I definitely didn't have anything to wear. For once, Brett's old clothes were not going to save me. So Brett took me vintage dress shopping. That was a disaster. I can tell you that there's no dress from the 1940s or 1950s that was made for a very tall woman like myself. So he took me places, he waited patiently at the changing rooms, but I wouldn't come out. In the mirror, everything made me look like some kind of cartoon giant, like Paul Bunyan trying to get into a little black dress. Eventually, I got one over my hips and all the way down to my knees, probably to the full length on an average sized person, but it had two straps across the bodice. I came out to show Brett. He said, "Our search is over. You have to buy it immediately." "Oh, but Brett, it's $25. Okay, even then I knew $25 for a dress to wear to the opera was not going to be too much. He was going to make me buy this dress. So I said, "Okay, but I am not buying new shoes for this." He was crushed. "Joanne, shoes set the mood." Well, that night, arriving at the San Francisco Opera for a Saturday night performance, I deeply regretted wearing my tennis shoes. Brett looked great with perfectly polished black shoes. He took me by the arm and he swanned us inside. It's all attitude, Joanne. We shared a vulnerability in our interior lives, even without revealing all the specifics to each other. We both needed redemption. Might not have been more complicated than to prove our fathers wrong about who we each were. Homophobia, misogyny, rejection from our fathers drew us deeply together. We both understood shame. I saved Brett's letters. They're great. I thought of you, Joanne, the night we all went to Peter's for dinner in Oakland. Oh, yeah. Peter, I'd never met him, and he so surprised me by cooking dinner himself. Plus, he had linen tablecloth, and he lit candles on the table. And then we all went dancing. Yeah, we did. You guys took me to a gay club, and it was the best dancing. And I remember I loved seeing you that happy. Oh, yeah, I was that happy. And I was so happy to have been able to take you there and give you that feeling. Oh, see, that's my friend for you. His gratitude for making me that happy. All right, this one's very important to me. Joanne, I've been thinking of you a lot. Recently, when you'd not heard from me, you wrote that you were afraid I was unhappy with you, that you'd done something wrong. Driving back tonight on the freeway, I was thinking I want to tell you I love you permanently, that I consider you one of my chosen family. You're precious. If there is anything between us, I will tell you immediately, because I don't want to function with anything between us. Brett and I each had a terrible time in grad school. And we tried to communicate it to each other in any way we could, sending anything, trying to describe it. Brett sent me this image that he kept on his desk. You can see that it has a man between concrete slabs. It's to express his loneliness and his despair. I sent Brett a poem by Dorothy Miles. It's one that I kept with me and I read over and over because it's what I wanted to say to my advisor. If I were I would not give my hand humbly to cooperation, your way, no. I would unbind the links, chains around my neck that gag me, and let my great hate vomit in your face, then smile if I were I. Often Brett's letters came illustrated. He said this one, he diagrammed this house that he wanted for us. And he pointed out all the things. He says, well, I like it because it's so playful. And Joanne, wouldn't you like to do your studying and drink tea in the little tower and then watch the sunset? And he annotated it all. Watch the distant sunset from here. Write letters, drink tea in this tower. Watch for our guests here. Welcome our guests from here. And then finally, have our lavish dinner parties in here. When I was still writing my doctoral dissertation at NYU, I got hired to teach a big lecture course. I splurged on the cost and I called Brett. He knew right away I would be most worried about standing in front of 100 students. I said, yeah, okay, I figured out what I'm gonna wear. Black jeans, black sweater, white collared shirt. And here's the thing, Brett, I'm gonna wear the same clothes every day, all semester. Long pause on the other end of the phone, and Brett said, oh dear. He was right that it wouldn't go well. Students asked me if I was wearing black all the time, if I was in mourning. The last day of the semester, I decided to switch it out. Instead of the black jeans, I wore a black skirt and black tights. I started the lecture, and a student came in the hall and stopped and shrieked, "You changed your clothes!" One conversation with Brett when I was visiting him in San Francisco changed everything. He had something to tell me, and he took me to a special spot up a hill in a neighborhood park. We sat on the bench together, looking out. It was chilly, it was April, but my arm next to Brett was warm, and I was waiting for what he wanted to tell me. He took my hand, but he kept looking forward out of the city when he spoke to me. I was looking at Brett, and I could see that his eyes were wet. He said, "I'm HIV positive." An abrupt shot through me, my organs sinking. The spring grass at my feet was cruel. AIDS. I was crying in a scream. Brett hugged me. I could hear him whisper, "I know." His hug tightened around me, my shoulders, my ribs. We sat together, crying for a long time. Brett choked when he said, "It's going to kill me." Brett wasn't long out of architecture school when he got his diagnosis. He was living in San Francisco. He had a job. He had his first serious boyfriend, Peter. They'd moved in together. And then suddenly, Brett was going to die. Because in the late 1980s, HIV positive was a death sentence. Brett did die after several pain-filled and impoverished years. Brett died in early 1993, along with 40,000 others just that year alone in the US. Not only did my best friend die, but when Brett died, I knew that I had failed him. He needed me, and I let him down. In those last years, I couldn't give Brett my heart anymore. I was too overwhelmed by my own life. My mother got lung cancer, and then she died. I got abused by my advisor. I got hired as a junior professor in an elite university. I had 2 ulcers and severe migraine headaches. And Brett, my Brett, was dying of AIDS far from me. I couldn't make my life work. And I let go of Brett. Of course, I'd gone to say goodbye to him. I went to the Midwest where he was dying at home with his mother and his sister in Michigan. But that didn't count because I knew that I had abandoned him emotionally. I couldn't support him. I couldn't give. Brett is dead. These decades, missing him, mourning him, also living with my guilt for abandoning him, looping in my head. At the 20th anniversary of Brett's death, I went back to Michigan to help his sister clear out Brett's belongings from the family garage. As we sorted through the boxes together, I found that Brett had saved my letters. He'd saved my letters. It meant that he kept his promise to love me permanently. Here's the thing that happened. When I reread the letters, when I read what I had written to Brett, the letters he saved, when I read them, I found out I hadn't abandoned Brett. I was in touch with him the whole time. I was close to him the whole time. I sent him my love over and over. I kept my promise too. I told myself a different story. But the letters, what Brett saved, became an enduring gift to me because the letters gave the lie to my fiction. The love letters showed the truth. I hadn't abandoned him, and I gave him my love. Why do people say just friends? To be seen and loved. What is less than? What is second class about that?